Hello, 40 Waters. Longtime listeners of the show will know that I'm a big believer in education, especially music education, and I'm excited to announce that this episode is brought to you by TrueFire. I've partnered with TrueFire to bring you an opportunity to get into their lessons at an affordable rate in a way that's going to help you, help the podcast, and get you playing more guitar. I'm excited to say that you can use the code 40WATT, 40WATT, at checkout to get 40% off your first or next purchase through TrueFire. That includes their all access pass to have access to all of their lessons and videos and jams. I highly recommend it. I use it myself. I'm a huge fan. I truly believe in TrueFire's motto of live, practice, and play. Please use the link below to get started, and happy learning. This episode is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. There's a wonderful crew of people over on Patreon giving money every month to make sure that this show and this podcast happen and cut my overhead costs so that I can keep doing it. I can't express my thanks enough for their support and their belief in what we're doing over here. And if you'd like to join them and help support this podcast, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can support this show. And actually, now that we are starting to get sponsors for the episode, my $3 supporters will get the episodes ad-free. If you want to support at a $5 level, you'll get ad-free episodes and you will get additional content every week. I thank all of you that have given money to help keep this going, and I thank all of you that are going to become supporters and help make sure this show keeps happening. Thank you so much. All right, welcome 40 Waters. Welcome to another episode of the 40 Watt Podcast, Season 2, Episode something. Y'all, I'm a librarian. I'm not a mathematician. I don't know the numbers. Welcome to the newest episode. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing and following and whatever the function is on the media that you are listening, watching, whatever. Do that thing. Rate, review, all the buzzwords. Smash the like button, subscribe, bell icon, things like that. We're going to move into this episode. I'm super excited to have Neil from Newtone Strings with us this week. Neil, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We were just talking in the pre-episode. It's kind of a weird day. I woke up to a Tupelo, Mississippi, which is a town about an hour and a half, hour north of me, drive, stealing an airplane and flying around and threatening to crash into Walmarts.
Oh,
so yeah, it's a wild time. He's still in the air as we speak. So hopefully that will come to a peaceful conclusion. But yeah, it's been a weird day. So that's how I'm doing. It's a weird time. So Neil, you and I have been talking for a little while, and you sent me a care package not too long ago of some strings, of which I've used a few sets. I still have a few I want to try out. I'm super excited. So right now, actually, when this podcast airs, it's still going on, is the Labor Day sale for Squire and a bunch of other brands are having their Labor Day sale here in the U.S. And I had joked because you sent me a set of bass strings, and I use flats on my P bass. And I was like, oh, I don't want to take my flats off. So I was like, I just need to buy another bass. And so I didn't do it. But Squire right now has a sale going on, and they had like the classic vibe late 60s Squire for like $230. And I was like, oh, yeah. So I'll be putting these on a bass soon. Maybe I'll make a video about that process. I may try to find some pickup upgrades for it too and make a video out of it. But neither here nor there. You are a string company based out of the UK.
Yep.
And I've been really, really impressed with these strings. I've got them on a couple of my guitars now. Which means I'm going to have to order some sets too, because it means I'm out of those gauges on those guitars. But so before we get too far down the strings rabbit hole, because it is a rabbit hole.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about you, how you got into guitar, how you got into making strings, the whole shebang.
Well, yeah. Started playing guitar. Picked up my sister's guitar when I was young. Tried to play. Taught myself basically. Then decided I wanted to be a sound engineer. Went to college, and the course was basically half performance playing and half recording. but never really was a master at the writing and performing and playing side of it. And there was always a lot better, but I was more focused on the actual recording side anyway. And then the university courses to move on to was very similar and definitely wasn't up to the playing side of things for that. So just decided I'm just going to get a job, see if I can earn some money and buy some gear myself. Turns out one of the technicians that worked at the college had previously worked for the string company Newtone, and his job was still available.
Oh.
So as I said, I'm not going to uni, I'm just going to find a job. There was, I know a job that's going, and it was literally on the doorstep. And yeah, fell into it. And 22 years later, I'm now owning the company and still making strings.
That is wild. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is gonna be a little bit of my ignorance because I just didn't know. Like when we started talking was my first real knowledge of Newtone.
Yeah.
Ignorant over here on this side of the Atlantic, but for me anyway, I've been a D'Addario string guy most of my playing career, as I'm sure a lot of people will be able to say that.
Yeah.
A lot of people. I tried Ernie Balls, and this is not a condemnation of Ernie Ball strings because obviously they make good strings too. But early on in my playing, I bought Ernie Ball strings because they were local, and I put them on my guitar, and the high E came unwound when I tuned it up to pitch, and I was like, well, that stinks. But I was like, things happen, so I went and got another set, and the same thing happened. And I didn't use Ernie Ball again for like 20 years because of that experience. But so I've been a D'Addario guy, but I've been working recently to try some new things. I've tried the Kurt Mangan strings. I've tried String Joy, obviously based out of Nashville. And then you sent me these, and so I'm trying these. It's the string, like with everything guitar, the string market's kind of blowing up recently too. Like,
Yeah.
you see that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of stick to our own thing
Yeah.
a little bit because we're just a small. We're more like a luthier. You come to us when you want something specific. You want to talk
Yeah.
through the options. We've got obviously off the peg versions that are our kind of thing, but we try to just help people find the right string. So yeah, if you want off the shelf strings, there's plenty of really good companies out there. We can't attempt to try and compete with them because there's only three of us. So when you're making
Right.
everything by hand, yeah, it takes a while. And so we just look at quality and offering all the options that are available with what we've materials and facilities we have, so that if you want a custom set, not a problem.
Yeah. And so I've got a few of the sets in front of me that I have. I can show them on the camera if you're watching on YouTube. You can see some of these. These are the Masterclass acoustic guitar strings in I think 12 to 54. I like the packaging. I like the resealable packaging, by the way.
Yeah, cool.
Because a lot of people, they reach into a pack of strings and they only need one string because the string broke, and
Yeah.
I've done that too. You know what happens to guitar strings when they sit in the guitar case, like unwrapped anymore? It's like, don't put those on anymore. It's like they're not going to last you. They're going to sound terrible. But one of the other things I discovered, and this is something I sort of wanted to talk about. Maybe you can give me and my listeners a little more understanding. Like, you sent me both some round core and some hex core strings, and I never really thought a lot about the core on strings. And then suddenly I'm thinking about it, and the strings that have stayed on my guitars the longest at this point now, because I don't have corrosive sweat. I clean my strings, so strings tend to last. And I used to play with a really heavy touch, so I'd end up with the divots at the frets on the strings. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't quite play that hard anymore. I rotate guitars out, and I don't have that acidic sweat that a lot of people have. So strings last me a long time, which is great, which is why I still have so many sets. But the hex core, it's like I don't want to change them because there's something different there. So I'm going to need you to elucidate me on hex versus round and why. What difference does it make?
Yeah, okay. So basically hex core will be what you've played from 99% of all of the companies.
Okay.
Um, round core we find works really well for the acoustic side of things, which is where we kind of really developed and picked up from to start with. So the round core gives a slightly lower tension to pitch and a slightly warmer tone, so you lose a little bit of the top end brightness and zing, but there's still plenty there. But
Yeah.
it's just takes a little bit of edge off, but it makes it slightly easier to play. But it's more of an acoustic kind of tone we find, and it's horses for courses. Every guitar is slightly different, so every guitar wants something slightly different. So one slightly warmer than another, one slightly brighter. Some people don't like brand new strings, so yeah. But we find the round core gives that good option. So on an electric, again, it just takes that edge off. So if you've got a maple neck, you've got a really bright guitar that you don't like the sound of brand new strings on, the round core just tones it down that little bit, and yeah, it gives you slightly different options. Maybe you want to go for a thicker gauge, but you don't want
Mm-hmm.
to have to play thicker gauges because they're a bit heavy under the fingers. So the round core just makes it a little bit easier to play, but you've got plenty of tone.
Okay. I hadn't even thought about that aspect
Yeah,
of
yeah,
it. It's one of those fascinating things because I've always believed it, and I do this with most of my guitars, but it's always just been like as simple as going up and down a set gauge,
yep,
like in the fine tuning of my strings for my instruments.
yeah,
But now I'm finding like, especially now, it used to be, I had two scales of guitars. I had 24 and 3/4, and I had 25 and a half.
yeah,
Now I've got a 25 and I've got these other like scale lengths that I don't even remember off the top of my head. I feel like I need a spreadsheet
yeah,
to keep up with this guitar uses these strings.
yep,
um and it has this scale length so that it can handle these tunings. If I change to this tuning, which I'm really experimenting with tunings lately,
yeah,
which is a great way to go through strings, by the way.
yep,
um I'm really experimenting with tunings, and so I'm constantly like, oh, because I just put a set on my acoustic. I went and bought a cheap set to try because I'm trying to tuning my acoustic guitar down,
yeah,
and I got the heaviest acoustic set my local shop had, and they are rubber bands. So
yeah,
I'm gonna have to get something even heavier. But it's so hard to fine tune that for your instrument, but it's an important part of your sound. Like you said, I love the sound of brand new strings.
yeah,
Like that's been a big deal for me. It's why I didn't when Elixir first came out and they were doing the coated strings. I tried them on all my
yeah,
acoustics, and they sounded like there was a blanket over the guitar.
yeah,
Like, sure, they held their tone forever, but they sounded 3 days old the day you put them on.
yeah, yeah. There's a
And
coating; it's stopping things coming out. It's yeah,
yeah, I to their credit, coding technology has gotten a lot better. I've tried some coded strings recently that are
yeah,
way better than those, but um,
absolutely. No, nothing against it, but yeah, I mean, for us being so small, to do a coated string is just unfeasible. People wouldn't. I mean, elixirs are quite expensive when you compare to a standard set of strings, but for us, it'd make them 3 times more expensive because you're having to ship wire here, there, and everywhere
right.
across the world to find somebody that will coat it and then send it back. Then you wind it and send it out. So yeah, it's not really feasible. So we just stick with what we do and make the best strings we can.
Yeah, and y'all's selection is pretty broad. When I went on the website and we first started talking and I looked at all the things, I was like, the
Yeah,
selection, like the way you can put it together is and we're seeing this a little more. Over here in the US we have Stringjoy that does a similar thing where
yeah,
you can sort of pick and choose and customize your sets. And I love that this exists because it's it's how the idea of the set of nines, or the super slinkies, if we're going to use the Ernie Ball terminology that they used at the time, it's how those came about. People bought regular electric guitar strings, which were much heavier gauges then, moved everything up a string and bought a banjo string to put as
yeah,
the E.
yep.
So
Yeah, I mean Hendrix
everybody,
was using custom gauges, so it's been
yeah,
everybody's always used it. But we
yeah,
also
it's
not only do we offer custom gauges, we can offer custom ways of making a string, so we can put thinner cores in or thicker cores.
Yeah,
so you can
and
have the
that
same
that
gauge
starts to
string.
break my brain.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
just breaks
But
because
if you,
like trying to. Well, I was going to say that's the rabbit hole that I was talking about.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
it's such a massive rabbit hole of how can I experiment with this in every possible, because if you're like me, you start looking for every minute. It's y'all, it's very simply, it's gas. It's gear acquisition syndrome, but you can't buy more guitars and amps because they're expensive. So you're looking for that next thing that you can tweak and buy and satisfy, get that shot of serotonin in your brain to do something to fiddle with things. It's that tinkerer's mentality.
yeah,
And so looking at the website, I was like, oh, can different get different cores. I can get, different size cores. I can customize the, oh, if I wanted to do a DADDAD tuning where it's just open fifth, I could get the strings to do that. And
and the
it's
wrapping
it's the
material,
biggest rabbit hole. But what's that?
and the
Yeah, the wrap
wrapping material.
material.
Yeah. So you've
Yeah,
got phosphor
and
bronze, 80-20 bronze, nickel, and stainless steel.
yeah, and that's I know I don't like nickel, even though I know a lot of people. This is one of those things that I've tried to go down that rabbit hole too. I put a set of nickel strings on an acoustic guitar once, and I was like, this sounds thin.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
just it doesn't have. I'm a phosphor bronze person.
yeah,
I'm I'm a, I'm I'm an absolute luddite when it comes to like acoustic guitar strings. I'm like, give me like that traditional thing.
yeah,
Like I don't play bluegrass, but give me that thing.
yeah.
That's what I expect an acoustic guitar to sound like.
Yeah, well, that's
And
why the monos started coming on as well, which we've started doing. That Martin came
oh
back
yeah,
in
the
with.
Martin.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
so
y'all are doing that now.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
got the mono going, and that they're really taking off for like resonator and acoustic strings.
Yeah, that's real. Though, and that material, I remember reading something a while back, is really hard to find because it had dipped and dipped of the people making it. It was just almost no one was using that material anymore. And then all of a sudden, people started talking about it again, and it's like, oh well, I can't find it.
Yeah,
So I'll put links to. I may try to find an article on that I read on that on Monel Strings and link it in the information below if I remember. I'm not great at remembering these things, but it's really fascinating the way uh, material for strings has changed over the years. The way the wrapping styles, like you have and we want to explain this a little bit because I think this is interesting. You have a note that says, "Do not cut strings until installed and tuned to pitch."
yeah, that's because of the round
And
core and the way we make them. Yeah, so the wrapping
yeah,
is not secured. You can cut them. So if you've got Fender style old school tuners with the
yeah,
slotted heads, you just have to make sure you bend it first, and then you can cut it because the bend will hold it in place as long as it's a good sharp bend. Um, but yeah, but that's obviously that's part of doing it in a
yeah.
different way. So
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I never thought I would find strings as fascinating as I have in the last year or year and a half, and going down this rabbit hole of figuring out what I like, what I don't like, and like you said, the custom gauges is something I'm really getting into because I'm tuning down. I just put a set of 13 to 56 on my SG because I'm tuning down to open C,
yeah,
and I like that on that guitar, but that same set didn't work on every guitar, and
yeah.
you know,
Well, that's it. Everybody's brought a guitar that they don't necessarily get on with. It's not quite what they had in mind. And you can start swapping pickups and start swapping everything else around. But you can just start with the strings, get the gauge right, get the right material on there. It suddenly comes to life.
yeah, and it's like finding the right pickups for a guitar, or the right, um, and not every guitar is for every player. I have a lot of guitars. I have way more than I should.
Yeah.
Um, so you've been at Newtone for over 20 years now.
Yep.
How long has the company been around?
Since 1985.
Okay,
So yeah, Malcolm
so
Newton started it. Yeah.
I'm looking at my math
Yeah.
again. So yeah, it was
Coming up.
it was about 15 years or so before you joined. It had been
Yeah.
around before you started working there.
Yep. Yep. That's it.
That's so since you started working there, I'm really curious. How have you seen the string and guitar industry in general change? How is it different?
Uh, I mean, it's difficult because say we've tried to just keep going with what we do,
Right.
and we you kind of see trends that people start asking for different things. So because we do thick strings and ridiculously thick strings, the metalheads are going thicker and thicker and thicker and lower in tuning. So yes, that side's really picked up.
Yeah, I
But
think the whole
yeah,
thicker strings and lower tunings is starting to infect the rest of music too, because I'm not a metalhead by any stretch of the imagination. Uh, I play roots Americana and blues music, but you got players like Ariel Posen, Joey Landreth out there playing in open C and sort of preaching the gospel of open C
yeah,
tuning and slide playing. And you're seeing a lot of players. I'm seeing a lot more people playing in D standard than I ever saw.
yeah,
Um, I've always been a fan of D standard because of my voice.
yeah,
Half step down works fine, but D standard really suits my singing voice much
yeah,
better. And so, and it's not always a pitch thing. It's not always a key thing.
yeah,
Sometimes it's just a timbre of the instrument changes when you tune it
yeah, yeah,
down. I have a Larrabee. It's actually the one that I just tuned to open C. That I've had that guitar for 17 years now, and that guitar hates standard tuning.
yeah,
It sounds fine. It sounds fine, but that particular instrument, when I tune it down to D standard, just resonates.
yeah,
It just sounds so good. So I'm trying to make it work in open C now. We'll see if that
yeah.
ends up working out. But
Well,
do
that's
you
it. I
see a
mean,
lot more people asking for heavier strings now,
yeah, yeah. Um,
besides
certainly,
metalheads?
yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, we've got like John Gom, percussive fingerstyle player. He uses a 66 off the top of my head, but it's
Oof.
not only is it a 66, it's a 66 with a thicker core. So he's yeah, it's a bit of a brute that is.
Yeah, bridge cabling is what that
Yeah.
is.
So yeah, things like that. And then again, like you say, people are using it more in other types of music, but I suppose the metalheads have driven the market to make thicker strings, so they're more readily available. So
That's a really good point.
yeah,
We've always been an industry of using what's available to make it work, and so if
exactly.
one particular group is pushing for something to exist, the rest of folks are going to be like, "Oh, how can I use this?"
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
and do
Dingwall are
something.
making the multi-scale basses, but then the metalheads are jumping on board because it's a longer scale. They can tune lower, and then they want thicker strings to go even lower again.
At what
So,
point do you not hear it anymore?
and
Like, how much lower can the bass go?
yep, yeah. So
I,
yeah, we get some fun requests. I mean, we've got a Japanese maker. He's making 13-string basses.
gosh,
So yeah, and they're like fan
that's
fret. So it goes from an eighth hour plain string up to like a 200 and something on the low end.
I yeah, I can't like the idea. I tried to play a 7 string bass once in a shop and picked it up and was just completely lost.
Yeah,
I don't my hands don't know what this is.
yeah,
This is so the idea of something, double digit strings completely boggles my mind. I
yeah,
can't fathom that. But yeah, I'd imagine when you're making those instruments and you're playing those instruments, finding strings, you basically have to go custom maker at that
yeah.
point because
We
nobody
often
makes
get
that.
yeah. That's how a lot of people find us is because they've either modified an instrument or they've made an instrument themselves, and then they've gone. Actually, these normal strings don't reach. They don't fit. They just don't work.
Yeah,
So
it's like, oh, I'm having to buy 4 sets of strings to get the gauges and stuff that I want.
yeah,
I'd rather just buy one 13 string pack or whatever.
yeah,
I'm coming up with something off the top of my head. Now what the stuff I got from y'all is obviously much more traditional, nothing
yeah, yeah,
wild. Uh, I'm really excited to put the resonator strings on my resonator.
yeah.
So I do a bunch of those. I have the nickel plated. I don't know if y'all do a different one. Um,
Yeah, we did them in nickel, phosphor bronze, and mono. Again,
yeah.
just gives you the
See,
variation.
I'm gonna have to try the model ones. I want to
Yeah,
try them. I get the nickel. I get the nickel plated, not because I like the sound of them over the phosphor bronze, because I don't. I like
yeah,
the phosphor bronze better, but I find the nickel plated work better with the pickup on my
yeah.
resonator.
Well, that's it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. If you've got a
the
magnetic pickup, you need a magnetic material.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean the
otherwise it's not
mono
gonna work.
mono will work because it's got a lower. It is magnetic, but it's a lower output. But it's weird
Okay.
because it's kind of got the warmth of phosphor bronze on the low end, but the brightness of the nickel as well at the same time. So it's quite an
Interesting.
unusual beast. So unlike just a standard acoustic guitar, I mean, I had a
Yeah.
all maple jumbo, and finding the right strings for that was quite difficult. And then I'll try some of the mono on that, and it just came to life all of a sudden because you'd got the warmth and the low end to really drive the body, and then you'd still got the top to cut through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the right
It's
strings
really
for the right
interesting.
guitar.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that strings are right up there with picks to me, things that players don't maybe pay as much attention
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that they really should be. And I'm as guilty. Don't get me wrong. I go on my divergences, and then at some point or another, I get to where I just stock up on whatever the affordable string I can grab in the store is because I don't know if I'm changing a bunch of strings that time or something like that. And I'm like, oh, these are fine. And then I put on a good set of strings again, and I'm like, oh, no, never mind. They
yeah,
weren't fine. I just
yeah,
stopped thinking about how much better. And for me, a lot of times it's not sound as much as it is just the feel of a string.
yeah, yeah.
You can feel the difference, and not all strings are made the same.
No,
It's the other reason I don't like most coated strings.
yeah,
I don't like the way they feel.
yeah. I mean, we do
The
the balanced tension sets as well, which again the Dario and people do now. But
Yeah,
what they're doing is just taking off the peg regular gauges and matching up the tensions, which is fine. But the way we made our Heritage and the Lucidity balanced tension sets is actually from the ground up. So they've all got thinner cores. We literally matched the cores up, slightly thicker wrapping wires, slightly unusual gauges. But the idea was a balanced tension and a balanced tone, and you don't get always get that from just off the peg gauges. So it gives them a totally unique feel, sound, and just
yeah.
makes
I
them
and
fingerstyle
I've got a set
players.
of the I've got a set of those Lucidity here that I'm going to be
Yeah,
putting on a guitar. I probably don't have time today. I'm probably going to do it
yeah,
tomorrow. I've had these in front of me. It's one of those things where you pick up the guitar you intend to restring,
yeah,
and then you end up playing, and you never end up restringing, and
yeah. Or you
that's what
restring them and
happens to
never
me.
play.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that too. I've
yeah,
I've done that one. I went on a binge one day. It was actually during the pandemic when everything was shut down, and I took a day and I was like, I'm gonna do like setup tweaks and new strings on
yeah,
all of my guitars, and it was like 8 guitars at the time, and I have a few more now, and I need to sell some stuff, but um. So I grabbed like all my guitars. I set up a space in the living room, and I just started setting up and changing strings. And it took me a while, and then I'm still not sure that there's not a couple of those guitars that I haven't played since. It's like I set them up and got them ready to go. No,
yeah,
I've picked up everything in the last few months because that's sort of a rule for me. If I'm gonna have it, I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna find
yeah,
a
yeah,
reason to play it.
yeah,
But yeah, it did sit for a while after I did that though, and was like, why did I do it? Why did it matter? I'm just gonna have to set it back up.
yeah.
But
Cool.
so strings is something I think players should pay more attention to and be willing to try other things. A lot of my Patreon supporters and the folks in our Discord have tried a bunch of other things because we all went on like a big journey.
Yeah,
We tried, you know, I've tried every string I could find. I've done the Kurt Mangan, I've done D'Addario, I've done String Joy, Ernie Ball. I went back to try Ernie Ball again because I was
yeah,
like, everybody likes these for a reason. I got to figure out why. And they're fine. I'm not down on them, but they're fine. I've done the Newtone now, and it's interesting to feel the difference for me more so than the sound because
yeah,
modern player by the time we put all the effects and weirdness that's happening in modern music anyway, maybe you're not hearing quite as much difference, but you're gonna feel it. And the
yeah,
it's sort of the argument about amp in the room versus in-ear monitors.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not a matter of a sound difference. I mean, I've done both. They sound great. I just want to feel the air move around me, and you can feel it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why we found that acoustic players and bass players were more willing to try different things before the electric players kind of came on side with what we were
Yeah.
doing. Because, like I say, you're trying different pickups, you're trying different scale lengths, you're just trying different guitars, amps, cables, effects, and the strings are the last thing that you think of.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when
I
you've got
had
an
someone.
acoustic instrument, there's literally the strings, the pick, your fingers, the guitar. That's it.
That's it. And so every decision matters there. It's sort of like your fret material matters there.
Yeah,
It matters on electric guitar too, whether anybody wants to believe it or not. Your
yeah,
fret material matters a lot. Um, but it's oh, I had something, but uh, with it, with everything mattering, especially in an acoustic environment, uh, I had something on bass strings that I just now completely lost, ram dump, brain gone. It just is what it is. But it's a sort of the same conversation I had with Rick from Honey Picks when we were on, and talking about the tone of the pick, the way it attacks the string, the way it, some people play with a grip, and sometimes that grip can grab the string
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's too far down the pick, and it all affects the way you play. It all affects the sounds you make, but sometimes it's about getting things comfortable for you. I know I can't play with certain picks that certain people love, and they probably sound the same, but the way I approach it is different.
Exactly. Yeah,
And so finding comfortable strings, I did a little bit of time, and this is where I really started to figure out how much strings mattered. I did a little bit of time as an upright bassist.
right.
Not a great one, but I did play and gig a little bit as an upright bassist. And the struggle to find strings for an upright bass that you like is one of the most expensive challenges I've ever come across. And I know y'all don't do double bass strings, but
No,
um, at least I don't think, unless you tell me you do, which is gonna
no,
blow
no.
my
Our
mind.
machines aren't
No,
long enough.
oh yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and it's the upright bass string market is so wild that there's a market for used double bass strings.
Yeah,
Like there are forums to sell your used double bass strings because people will just the clean them as best they can and move them on to somebody
yeah, yeah,
else. So that was the affordable way for me to finally find strings, because like some people like super high tension, and I don't know how they play it.
yeah,
I am a wimp compared to the average upright bassist, apparently, because I needed lower action. I needed the easiest tension strings I could find, and that was how I could play. And other people are like playing these high tension cables
yeah.
and bending them. It doesn't mean don't mess with upright bassists. That's
No,
what I'm saying. Don't mess with them. But it changed my view on strings. I started paying more attention.
yeah.
Um, so I find it really interesting. Um, so I'm curious if the pandemic had the same effect on your business as it did on so much of the guitar market. Did you see an uptick actually during the pandemic, or do you pretty much hold serve?
Yeah, it was steady. What we did notice is we found quite a few more local customers coming to us because
Oh,
the music shops weren't open, so they were just googling
oh
where
yeah,
can I find strings, and then actually there's somebody local that does it. And because we're just a small manufacturer, me and my partner, she came in because she couldn't work, and we just carried on working together. And the two lads that work for me, they stayed at home, so it's nice and safe, and we may as well have been at work as stop at home. So we managed to just keep things ticking over, and yeah, obviously we weren't getting big bulk orders, but we were keeping things going with lots of little orders, and say a lot of more local customers. And
yeah,
it was an interesting time. I mean, getting hold of materials and supplies was difficult, but that was just the same for everybody. So, but we'd got suppliers that kept us going, and we started coming out the other end, and yeah, carried on. So yeah, it was
So
a strange time.
yeah, it was a strange time. I don't we all it isn't even worth noting because everybody knows how strange a time it was, but it's like it's really interesting to hear how various businesses found ways to keep going.
Yeah,
Some saw massive success. I mean, Fender reported 2020 was their best year ever.
yeah, yeah,
uh and now they're laying off employees, but that's neither here nor there. That's not what we're here to talk about. I'm just going to throw that out there. But something that I really wanted to note, though, despite all that, despite the pandemic, and I'm sure this won't always. This is why I'm not going to name numbers here because who knows what it'll be in the future. When you sent me a package of strings just to check out before we ever talked about doing the episode, just to see what I liked and what I didn't. I started looking at the prices on your strings, and for a small custom string company, your prices are so incredibly reasonable. Like
Well,
that
we
was
cut out the middleman. We generally
yeah,
sell direct, so we can afford to be competitive.
yeah, and it was I think juststrings.com is the North American retailer, or
Not
is
anymore. No,
a no,
it's
not
Guitar
anymore.
Gallery.
Guitar Gallery. Thank you. I
Yeah, in
apologize.
Nashville. Yeah, yeah,
Um, my Google search failed me there.
yeah,
Um, so, but yeah, it was like I looked them up and I was like, there are other custom string companies that are not this affordable.
yeah,
So it's like it's not a massive jump from your D'Addario Ernie Ball price range
yeah,
to get into some custom gauge strings, some strings with a little extra option, a little extra feature, maybe a little more attention to detail because it is a 3-person run shop. I'm not saying the others have lower quality. I'm just saying there are things you can pay attention to when you have 3 employees
yeah,
that are harder to pay attention to when you have 30 or 300
yeah,
employees.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's why we can do the custom things that are really unusual and weird and wonderful instruments. I mean, we do basically anything that's handheld because of the length of the machines. So yeah, we've done some very unusual things.
Yeah,
Um,
I went on a search and was like, it's all the standard fare: electric, acoustic, bass. Of course, you do 12 strings, then mandolin, and you also do pedal steel strings.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, sitars.
oh wow, I
Yeah,
didn't even think.
yeah.
Y'all do y'all do oud? I don't think
We
oud
have
uses
done.
metal.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah,
really?
yeah. We all any kind of like traditional folk instruments, as long as they're not gut. But yeah, mandolins, mandolas, mandocellos, bouzouki guitar bouzouki variations. Yeah, your Fender Six basses, special sets for them. Yeah, it's a weird and wonderful
That's
world of instruments out there, and we can cope.
so. Do you ever get any time to still play? You ever gone back and tried to get back into playing, or are you just full time in the manufacturing side of things?
Yeah, just manufacturing. I play a little bit for my own amusement, but yeah, it's good to keep your hand in and see what people are doing and what they're up to and how they're doing it and see if there's any new markets opening up.
Yeah, and I feel like there are. I think we're about to see. I think actually think we're already seeing it a resurgence of guitar and stringed instruments in a way that had sort of faded for a little bit. Not that there weren't people playing it, and actually for me, for my local scene, uh, people had to tell me the guitar had faded because I live in Mississippi. You know, it's like blues and roots and country music down here, and so everybody plays guitar. Like people would say, "Oh, the guitar's not as popular as it used to be." I said, "Are you crazy? Like I have to search for people who don't play guitar. There's a million guitar players down here." But yeah, it I realized what they mean. Popular music had not had as much guitar in it, but we're seeing a whole lot more of it return, and I'm hoping that that means, continued interest in the instrument, some really creative uses of the music coming
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
maybe even some more creative instruments. Do
yeah.
y'all do? Oh, this leads to a good point. Do y'all do strings for headless instruments or any of the specialty stuff like that?
Well, a lot of the headless ones now are cottoned onto the idea of clamps rather than double ball ends. So yeah, we can sort that out. I mean, the double ball end strings we have done in the past, but yeah, we're not able to do them anymore, and they're very specific because they've got to be very specific lengths, and there are
Right.
variations. But it's like the double bullet Floyd Rose guitars. I mean,
Oh, I
it was
remember
a great
those.
idea, and I'm sure they did strings for a while, but I've had people because they can't get the strings anymore, so they're
Yeah.
having to convert them to something else to be able to keep using the instrument. I mean, just keep it
And
simple.
and that's where I love innovation in the industry, but you have to remember need to innovate in a way that these things might outlast you, and
Yeah,
you can't supply the part that is, innovate with what is available
yeah,
to a
yeah,
lot of people.
yeah,
Yeah, don't be so custom that you've got to find a machinist to make parts later on because you're not in business
yeah,
anymore, and that makes their instrument useless because this one part eventually failed.
yeah.
And there's a headless guitar that I can't remember the model sitting in my local shop right now, on consignment, and that guitar is waiting for someone who already owns one and wants one for spare parts.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what that guitar is there for, and that's all it's good for,
yeah,
because it's had one of those very specific setups
yeah.
that they don't make parts for anymore, and you can't get the things you need to keep it going. And so it's just waiting for someone who says, "Oh, I've been looking for one of these to gut for parts." It's frustrating.
Yep,
It's
yep, yeah.
incredibly frustrating. So, and I know you're based in the UK. Where are you based at in the UK?
We're in Derbyshire, right in the middle of the country. So,
Okay.
um, about an hour's drive away, you can be in Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood came from.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, for a nerd like me, that's awesome. But
yeah.
uh,
Or
so
then you can go another hour in another direction. You can be in Birmingham from Black Sabbath country, Ozzy Osbourne's hometown, or north,
yeah,
and you can get in half an hour and be in Sheffield, and that's Def Leppard territory. So yeah, a lot of good bands coming out of like Sheffield and Birmingham and all this area.
yeah.
Arctic
And of course, there's
Monkeys.
the I've never been to it because I've never been to the UK, but I hear lots of talk about the Birmingham Guitar Show, um,
Yes.
or the actual name of it is. But yeah, I hear that's a really really good one.
Yeah.
Would love to get over there one day to go to that because I hear it. Joe Branton over at the Guitar Nerds talks about it a whole bunch,
Yeah.
and every year when it comes around, he must talk about it for 10 weeks around
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So it must be good if it gets him that excited about it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
do
It's the
y'all tip?
biggest kind of one we have in this country. There's a lot of smaller, niche kind of ones. Um, the Ullapool, especially if you're into acoustic instruments in Scotland, there's a little Ullapool festival, and that's like top class quality luthiers and things go up there, and it's basically 3 days of just playing and just loving acoustic and roots
Yeah,
acoustic instruments. Yeah.
it's got to be a little quieter than the shows with the electric guitars.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
a little less taxing on the ears.
Yeah.
Oh, but so the reason I asked, because so you're not really in a metro area for a city. You're kind of out.
No.
People have to find you. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming you're in shop. Are you in shop? You're in shops in the UK. Like people can find you in some of the UK
No,
shops at all?
no.
No.
Again, yeah, we just sell mainly direct. There's a few little
Huh.
suppliers that we go to, but yeah, we just because of the costs and things, it was easier
Yeah.
to just sell direct. I mean, we've got say little shops dotted around the world. So we've got say Guitar Gallery in Nashville. We've got the 12th Fret
Yeah.
in Canada, and we've got Australia and a few others like dotted around and a couple into Europe, France and places that just have a bit of a home for us so people can get hold of them still, but then we sell direct because again we're selling custom things and it's a bit
Right.
difficult
Right.
going
Right.
through a third party. So yeah, but yeah, it's
Interesting. Yeah. Which
everything.
is like those little pockets of retailers are good for a player like me who I pretty much like the standard gauges.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need anything custom made yet.
Yeah,
This whole open sea challenge that I'm on right now may end up getting me down that route, but
you just
we'll
don't know
cross
you
that
need
bridge
them.
when we get. Huh? What's that?
You just don't know that you need them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that I need them yet, so I haven't done the madman scientist of the buying dozens of sets of strings and like picking and choosing I have some friends who have gone down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole of like, well, if I bought a set of eights and bought a set of 13s and I bought a set of 11s and I took these strings out of all of those, I was like, yeah, and like you could have bought this gauge and then just one gauge difference. Like one string is different from this one set you could have bought. But or sometimes you come up with something completely madhouse, and which is I doubt that's going to happen to me. I'm going to be really honest. I'm a simpleton when it comes to this stuff. Like, I trust the tried and true gauges that have existed before. I just need to go
Yeah,
up or
yeah,
down pretty
yeah,
much. But I've loved the movement for balance tension strings.
yeah,
Those have sort of changed the game for me, and I think as I start buying more strings, because I've had a backlog, because I'm that guy who walks into a
yeah.
music store and like always buys a few sets of strings,
Yep.
just for an excuse to go in there. So I've got a drawer full of strings. When I work through that backlog, I think as I start moving forward, it's going to be balance tension for at least all of my electric guitars, because
Yeah,
they feel so good to
yeah,
play, and I like I like thicker low end strings, but that was something that always kept me away from them. Is that like
yeah,
there's such a tension difference,
yeah.
or it could have been in my head, which is not uncommon either. But
Well,
do
that's
you
it.
see those really taking off anymore? Am I alone in this?
No, no, the balance tension have really come on just recently. Again, it's one of those things you have to try and see the benefits of it. Same with any, like you say, with a lot of strings, it's everybody gets used to just playing the same old things. Um, so you just you go and buy your set of tens, your set of nines, because it's just what you're used to and we're familiar with. So
Yeah,
yeah, but
or for me,
again,
tens and 11s. For
yeah,
me, I can't play nines anymore. I I do not have the finesse to play nines. I can't do it. I bend chords completely out of tune, and I tried. I was like, oh, it's just a technique thing. I'll teach myself better technique. I'll be a better player. A month goes by, and I still can't play just a standard bar chord in tune anymore. I'm like, I can't do this.
yeah,
I'm going back. Um, I really, really am jealous of players who can play eights. There
yeah,
was the video you probably saw, the Rick Beato Rhett Shull video from a couple of years back, where they talked about string gauge, and like they tried eights and how the sound isn't really different and the feel changes. I was like, let me see this.
yeah,
And I played eights, and I was like, I could play these all day and my hand never get tired, but I can't play them in tune to save my life.
yeah. I mean, Billy Gibbons uses sevens.
Yeah. Yeah, and as the story goes, is because he used to use thicker strings, and BB King told him, "Why are you working so hard?"
Yeah,
I was like, I really hope that story's true. I have no idea if it is, but I love the idea of BB King looking at him and going, "Man, why are you working so hard?" Because BB supposedly used eights,
right.
um, so it makes a lot of sense, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
wild to me because we're talking about players in their heyday before the custom gauge thing. Eights weren't exactly an off the shelf set.
No.
Uh, I say before custom gauge. Before custom gauge was easy to come
Yeah,
by,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so they're having to find ways to get these thinner strings. Uh, and I can't imagine I didn't play in those days. I mean, I'm a completely privileged guitar player who started playing guitar in 1999. So I came into this world with everything available at my fingertips.
Yeah.
Uh, I can't imagine. Well, awesome, awesome. Well, Neil, I think we're nearing the end of the regular episode. I think, and we're going to uh, get over to the Patreon episode, and we're gonna hang out, talk a little more about guitars, talk about a little more about strings, because I have a couple of more questions I want to ask about some of these. I didn't want to dive too far down some of the string minutia on the regular episode, because I realized that I'm talking to a very small crowd at that point.
Yeah.
um, and many of you would have at that point gone, okay, Philip, this is way beyond my nerddom, and I need you to shut up. So that's what we're going to do over on Patreon. So if you like getting really nerdy about things, Patreon might be the place for you. Where you can go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can get this episode without the ads and in the beginning, and the ads that may be in the middle by now. I don't know. I'm looking for some mid-roll ad sponsors. So if you're interested, please come and talk to me. You can email me at 40wattpodcast@gmail.com. But over on Patreon, for $5 a month, you can get this episode and bonus content every week. We also have a Discord server. Hop on over to Discord. There are links on the website and on my link tree. Links are all below. And come hang out with us, talk guitar, and talk nerdiness with us. And we appreciate it. Neil, I really appreciate you taking your time with me. Coordinating time schedules with folks in the UK is always fun.
Yep. No problem.
Yes.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, no. And we're going to talk a little more over on the Patreon. But in closing, I want to thank all of our current Patreon supporters. At the medium wattage level, the $5 level, we have Tom Kelly, Scott Hamilton of the Effects Loop podcast, Rick Calhoun of Honey Picks, Kyle Harris, Kyle Benton, Jonathan Schwartz, Jim Burns, Jeffrey Walks, David Ishizaka of the Timber Owls, and Andy Koenig. Andy Koenig. I'm so sorry, Andy. I've jacked that up real bad. But at the $10, the high wattage level, we have Heath Batt, Dan Pilver of Lewitt Microphones, and Ben Fair. Appreciate all of your support. Y'all make this happen. And you help keep me making these episodes so I don't go broke. And I greatly appreciate it. In the meantime, y'all take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week. Be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.